Welcome, everybody.
Recording in progress.
And now recording is in progress. So now you all know that we're doing this via, the web as well as in person. So we will be recording this, of course. And welcome on behalf of the City Council. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate you taking time. We hope to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. That's the purpose of this, is to answer as much as we can. So today is Thursday, November 18th, 2021, and we're meeting in the council chambers at the Provo City Center. Council members have requested this meeting to discuss parking issues in the city, specifically parking in the Joaquin neighborhood. The format for this meeting is very different than regular meetings or work sessions of the council. There's going to be a lot more opportunity in this meeting for more people to say things, right? And we're hoping that we don't have to time you on your comments. Although, having said that, if we have somebody giving a speech that's going to prevent everybody else from saying something, we'll have to ask you to discontinue and send it in an email or send it in a different way, right? So just be respectful of each other too. We're expecting to be here till 8, and if you take a little bit of time and ask your questions, we're going to have time for most of you to say something. If you take a lot of time, we're not going to have time to hear from many of you. So we'll try to get to as much as we possibly can. As with other meetings of the Municipal Council, this one's being held in hybrid fashion, as we mentioned earlier. Members of the public can view this via the Provo City Council YouTube channel, or they may, of course, attend in person like you are. For those watching online, instructions on how to call in and participate are available on the screen on the description below the broadcast. So there are notes for those folks who are online to also participate in this meeting and ask questions, and we'll try to give them opportunity intermixed with the folks who are here to ask questions. We do have a few more chairs up front. I'm told, though, once the chairs are full, we've got to have people outside of this room, probably a fire code issue, but we do have some more chairs up here for those of you who are just coming in. So my name is David Shipley. I'm on the council. I've been asked to help facilitate this. I have no special role or leadership or anything like that. I'm just another council member. But we do have other council members here with us. Councilor Harding, Councilor Sewell, Councilor Fillmore, Councilor, I can't see anymore. Oh, Ellsworth, and Councilor Hanley. So we've got quite a few councilors here with us tonight. 6 out of the 7, and we're happy to be here and answer questions and also take notes on the concerns that you may have. Okay, so the agenda for tonight is that we expect 2 hours for this meeting. As I mentioned before, it'll be up to all of you how many questions we can get in based on how respectful you are for each other and how fast we go through it. We're going to prioritize questions. Initially, we'd like to answer as much and get as much information to you as we possibly can. We have already polled the public, right? We took online polling. We asked if you want a parking permit program and if you want to pay for parking, and 80% of you said no, we don't. So we have a pretty good indication that if asked, most people don't want to pay for something that they're currently getting free, right? So I would ask that if you have something constructive around that, some additional insight, some additional question about this, how it might work, that we focus on that tonight. I think we have a good feel for generally how people think about paying for something that they're currently getting for free, right? Okay, so we're going to initially have Councilor Harding give us a little bit of background on the parking issue and give us a little bit of background and information, hopefully answer the most common questions too, some of the most common questions that might come up about this. And then we're interested in hearing from you. So once he completes a short presentation, we'll have you line up behind this microphone and we'll just take as many questions as we possibly can get to. Like I say, we're prioritizing questions, not comments tonight. We're trying to get as much information to you as we possibly can. We're going to have the panelists up here take shots at answering the questions, but we also have some city staff here, some specialists regarding parking here with us to help us as well. We're all part-time folks that are not, PhDs in parking. We're just trying to do the best we can to try to help a situation. And so we'll answer the best we can. And then if we need to, we'll defer to our specialists as well. Okay. And again, just a reminder, no timer tonight unless we have to. I'd rather not. I'd rather just have us go through it and get to as many questions as we can. And again, we're going to anticipate being done with this meeting by 8 o'clock. So I'll go ahead and give time now to Councilor Harding to give his presentation, and then we'll go into the question format after that.
All right. Thank you, Dave. And got the presentation up. If you'll go to the first slide. I wanted to start out, just give some basic background information, hopefully, answer some of the questions that you have off the top. So, ever feel like you're missing out on a joke? Anyway, I wanted to start out by saying I've been working we have been working on an on-street parking management committee for about 4 years now. Everyone on the committee, the purpose, the reason why we're doing this is because we love our students. And that's one thing that hasn't been communicated very well. And so we want to make sure, everyone is clear that, if you haven't felt this way, I apologize, but we love our students. BYU, in particular, has grown up with Provo. And most people that I know that live here, whether because they're attending BYU right now or because, and they've lived here for 40 years, most people that I've met here came here one way or another because of a relationship with BYU. I would say that that's true with most of our counselors are either attended BYU or worked for BYU. I didn't, but I am here because I took a job at a company that was started by a BYU professor. My wife is attending BYU Idaho. My daughter is attending BYU Hawaii. My senior son is applying to BYU right now, and so if he goes there, then we'll complete the trifecta. But it does seem like just about everyone in Provo has some sort of connection through BYU. Many BYU students won't stay in Provo after they graduate, and we wish you well as you go out into the world. But enough of you will stay here and will become long-term residents that. And this has been happening for 100 years. And so it really has shaped what Provo is. And so anyway, just wanted to make sure that was clear. And those of us who have developed this proposal truly believe that this will improve the experience of BYU students and other students. We truly believe that, and the rest of the council will have to decide that later at some later point if parking management ever gets applied to Joaquin. So that's something that is still a question for many of the counselors, and that will still need to be decided later. So I'll just ask as we're going through this. Well, I think actually Mr. Shipley covered that even better. So we love our students. Second, thanks, John. We love on-street parking. Some people are saying, well, you just want to clear the street. Anyway, we love on-street parking. We think that it is a great amenity and it really plays into our quality of life. Here's a few situations, and we could probably write 3 times as many, when on-street parking is really convenient, and convenient doesn't even do it justice. If you've ever needed to drop something off at someone's house and you can't find a place to park out front and you aren't authorized to park in their parking lot because you're not attending there, what do you do? Towing is an issue that's been raging for many, many years as well. And I think it's tied to this because you can't find a place to park out on the curb. Some people are saying, well, I'm so desperate, I'm just going to park in here real quick, and then they get towed for a much higher fee than anything we're talking about. So we love on-street parking. On-street parking, I kind of joked earlier, but I'm only half joking that it's one of the greatest inventions of Western civilization. If you'll go to the next slide. The problem, though, is when there's excessive demand for that on-street parking, then all of those benefits, all of those things that are so nice to have with on-street parking goes away. You don't have those benefits. I can't tell you how many students I've met over the 5 years, 6 years now, that I've been on the council, and we talk about things and they love their BYU experience, but when they have complaints, almost always parking in South Campus is brought up. And so we hear the concerns like, I have to walk sometimes 3 blocks to get to my apartment at night after work, and I don't feel safe. Or anyway, there's so many. So we are trying to be responsive to that, and for years now have been studying what is the best way to address this. So we have a proposal, and we're here to talk about it. Let me also say, we'll go on to the next one. We value our landlords and our developers. Some people have seen this as kind of a fight between different groups here. Let me say that we depend on these people to provide safe, comfortable housing for a good portion of our population. Provo City doesn't want to be in the housing business. I don't think you guys want to rent from Provo City, and BYU, they do have some on-campus housing, but mostly they also rely on landlords and developers. And one of the reasons why one of the high costs of free parking is that it makes it more difficult to redevelop. And we can get into that. I won't go into the details now, but we would like to see better development, better apartment buildings. There's some housing in North Joaquin that really needs to be redeveloped. And that's being held back in part because of our parking problem, which constrains supply, which drives up prices. If you go on to the next slide, these are the objectives from the get-go for our committee. It is first and foremost to reduce the frustrations and improve the quality of life of the residents, the students. That is our main goal. Okay, and we're here to talk about if we think that that's helped or hurt by this proposal, but that is our main goal. Being predictable, encouraging the efficient use of street parking. Did you know that there are more off-street parking spaces in Joaquin than there are automobiles in Joaquin? But they're just not efficiently used. But there's the free parking makes it difficult, or is kind of a hindrance to the efficient use of those off-street stalls. One example, you've bought your pass, right? You can park in the underground parking garage or whatever, but you pull up and you see something on the street. That's more convenient. So you pull onto the street, you park there and run in. For some, this is not for everyone, not for anyone, not for everyone. North Joaquin is so diverse, and you have so many different situations, but that is one thing that does happen. We've done parking counts, 2 a.m. and all of the on-street parking is full, and there's still some stalls on off-street. So that's just one example. Doesn't apply to everyone by any means. Okay, go on to the next one. So I wanted to explain what was passed on this past Tuesday. There's a lot of confusion around here, and I'm going to pick on Dave here a little bit when he said, we asked you if you wanted, to pay for parking in Joaquin, and well, I don't think I'm paraphrasing now, but that survey that was sent out didn't actually ask your thoughts on whether we should have this program in Joaquin, but that's what we got back. A lot of people were answering that question, but that wasn't the question that was being asked. We were asking about a parking management tool. Okay, so just really quick, right now we have one tool for parking management, and it's permit parking. It's really based on the paradigm of having a paper tag hanging from your rearview mirror. And if you go on, So we have that chapter, and then click, I think, 3 more times. We have other subsequent chapters that take this tool and then apply it to a specific area. Okay. What we did last Tuesday is we did not create paid parking in Joaquin. What we did is we created a new, click one more time, we did create a new parking management tool that is not based on the old model of having a paper tag hanging from your rearview mirror. That's all we did. It is not applied to anywhere. There's nowhere in the city that has this. Okay, but we put it in place because we think that it may be a good tool in other places. For example, we have a draft, chapter 9.91, which is not implemented, but it has been drafted. It is a proposal, and it would implement this new tool in Joaquin. That has not been decided. Okay, that still is up for the public discussion. So I wanted to make sure everyone was clear. What happened on Tuesday was not ignoring the public feedback. It is not a done deal. That the tool is in place now, and before it gets applied to anywhere, the council needs to decide that that is in the best interest. Okay, last slide, or last segment. Really quick. So what's up to the council is the council now has a tool that we can apply to different areas. And what we do is we need to determine that there is excess demand for on-street parking. And the idea is to kind of encapsulate a large area around any problematic areas. And then it gives the parking manager flexibility to implement parking zones within this parking area that actually have the regulations. Next slide. Second to the last slide, and this is definitely the most dense, but hang with me for just a little bit. The default for this parking management area is no regulations. Okay, so even if we put something in place in Joaquin, covering all of Joaquin, the default is there's no regulations. Parking zones can be created within this parking area in areas of excess on-demand parking or on-street parking. And what that means is in a typical week, are there times in which all of the parking spaces are full? If so, that's the definition of excess demand. If that's determined, then we can put in the parking manager can put in a parking zone, and that parking zone then would require anyone to park there needs to be authorized. And the main way that people would become authorized to park there is they just check in on an app. Okay, if it's for visitors, you can just do it on a website. But for people that live here, it's going to make a lot more sense to download an app. Saves your license plate in there, saves your payment information in there. Try to make it as user friendly and easy as possible. Oh, and by the way, even in an area even in a parking zone, the default is still going to be that parking is free. You just have to check in before you can park there. And then during the times of excess demand, it will cost to park. But the point is that the minimum fee and the minimum rate and the minimum time that's necessary to address that demand is what would be charged. So, for example, and here's the thing, Joaquin, there's certain areas that have problems, just that the excess demand is overnight, but not during the day. Other places, it's during the day and not during the night. And some places have neither, and some places have both. And so this tool is designed to be very flexible to fit all of those situations. But for example, let's take an area, I'm probably over time. I'm getting really close though. Let's take an area that has medium demand, minimally excessive demand during the night. So we theoretically, like, okay, at 10 o'clock, everything is full and it's full until 8 in the morning. We could have that pay period all the way from 10 until 8. But what would happen if we only charge between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m.? If we have a price that's sufficient between 3 and 4 a.m. that makes it so that there's an open spot there, it's most likely that 2 a.m. there's going to be that spot there as well, and 1 a.m. And so we would only need to have that payment period quite small because, if someone's there, their friends are there till late or whatever, they wouldn't need to worry about paying because as long as we take care of that time, in the middle of the night, then anyway, I'm getting way too far into the details. The point is, the objective is we want to get it to the point where at maximum demand, there's one spot available on that block face. That's what we're targeting. If we put in a price and it's too high and we have 2 spots open, we need to reduce that price. If we put in a price and it still fills up and it's completely full, then the price is too low. And so that's what determines the price. And then just a caveat, there are some areas where it may make sense to allow a permit to be purchased per property. And this really would be for some certain situations, but really the main thing is that people pay by the hour just at the time where there's excess demand. And last slide. So the parking manager sets all of the parameters: where to put in the parking zones, when to put them in, when to take them out, what rates to charge, a grace period. The plan is that in all of these, the first 30 minutes is free. Even if you come in during a high demand time, first 30 minutes is free. We want people to have that amenity of having on-street parking available for those situations. And by the way, I talked about making changes to these parking zones. There's a notification needs to be done 2 weeks beforehand to everyone who owns and everyone who lives in that area. So you'll at least have 2 weeks notice before any changes are made. Okay, that is my presentation. Hopefully that gives a little bit of background information, and so we can have more helpful questions and answers. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to transition into questions. If you want to go ahead and start lining up, this will be exciting. Once you've asked a question, like I say, we're going to allow you an opportunity for a follow-up potential. But again, this isn't for giving a speech. This is for finding out more information about what's going on with the program and trying to figure this out. Also, before you speak, please give your name and the neighborhood you're from, please. You don't have to give us an address, but for purposes of trying to figure out for us where your perspective is, that would be helpful. We've got a lot of people online. So be patient with the fact that we're going to be trying to again, get people from online as well. Other? Yeah. So to make this efficient, the clapping and hollering and stuff like that, just keep that to a minimum, because then we can get through more people. The only other thing, as just a quick follow up to Dave's comments, and Dave's the pro on this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the 2-week notice, the anticipation is that we're not going to hit any area mid-semester or midterm or mid anything, right? This will be something that you guys will have plenty of heads up on before you make decisions about where you live and where you're choosing to be. So yes, there are requirements for us to give that notice, but it wouldn't be something that we anticipate doing in the middle of a semester on people who have already made decisions about where they're going to live. Okay. All right. So your name and neighborhood, and then let's start with the first question.
All right. My name's Scott Hilton. I currently live on the other side of university, but the last 4 years I was in the walking neighborhood. My question is, what is the parking manager? What company runs it? Have they operated in other cities? How has that gone? Etc.
Great question. The parking manager is somebody that we're currently hiring. It's a city employee. It's somebody who specializes and have background in parking and parking coordination. So I don't have an answer for who that is or what company. It's not a company, though. It's not a third party. It will be through the city. Yeah, Dave.
If I could just throw out that we currently have a part-time parking coordinator, parking manager. Javin, and he's done a great job. He stepped into this. His role is something else full time, and he has graciously volunteered to help out until we were able to hire a full time.
Did someone develop the app? Is there a company that did that, or is that in-house?
We're using a third party for the app. It's a common nationally used pay for time app.
Thank you.
And if you travel different places, a lot of parks and high demand areas will have some kind of parking app that you use to do parking. So
What is the app called? Do you know?
offhand, Paylot. Paylot.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would just say that these are some of the details that are still being worked out.
Okay. Should we take somebody online?
Yes. Taylor Knopp, we just asked her to unmute, so *6 to unmute.
Hi, North actually. So I live at Centennial Apartments, which is off of 900 East on the east side. My question is, for those students who have no option other than to park every night on the street because their complex does not have sufficient parking, how do you plan on accommodating for that when they have no choice but to use this resource?
Go for it. Is that on?
I think I just need to hold it closer to my mouth.
Perfect.
Okay. Great question. The idea is that there is currently the parking is free there, and the demand is so much that many people can't find places to park, and so this program doesn't eliminate any of that on-street parking. So the same number of people can park there, but there will be a cost if there's demand for that, and the cost will be whatever is necessary for some people to figure out to choose another alternative. So for some people, I don't know how old you guys aren't. Does anyone remember the story of Bronco Mendenhall when he first came as defensive coordinator? No. A story was told kind of showing his commitment to his job, that he drove in, he parked his car, he left it there all semester, and he came back at the, season, he came back at the end of the season and he couldn't find his car. He thought it was stolen, but he just forgot where he had parked it. I've heard from some of you, and this is not everyone, but there are some people that bring their car at the beginning of the semester and they leave it in a parking spot the whole semester and then use it to go home. When parking is free, some people will make that calculation and say, that's something I'm willing to do. If there's a cost, some people, maybe it's only 1%, but some people may say, I'm going to leave my car home and I'm going to carpool down, or I'm going to get dropped off. So it does not have to change the behavior of 90% of the people. It just needs to change it for a few. One of the things we've talked about is in Seven Peaks, there's a lot there that's not used during the wintertime. And so that could be used for longer term parking. That's not going to work for people that use their car every day, but it's going to be a lower price alternative for people that currently are using some of these spaces. So the idea, another thing, businesses right now, because parking is free on the street, there's not a demand that people aren't willing to pay for parking. And they're not willing to deal with the hassle of people parking on their lots. And so they just put up signs saying you will be towed if you park here. If there is a market, if people are paying $20 a month to park on the street, and a business can say, well, I'll charge you $15 a month and you can park in my lot between these hours. And some people may say, that's a good alternative for me. And so the idea is that it will free up and we will have better use of off-street spaces that will free up space for anyone who's willing to pay whatever the market rate is to park on the street.
You didn't quite answer my question.
Okay, ask a follow-up, please.
This is an important follow-up. So the thing is that there are some students who have no choice. They use their car regularly, but they simply cannot get a parking spot. So why would you want to charge a student who has no choice but to park close by on the street every night?
When you say can't find a parking spot, do you mean on the street or off the street?
Off the street.
Complex only has so many spots, and they only use so many permits.
Right.
Can you, sorry, let her clarify. Sorry, tell it's your turn.
Okay, so the idea is that all of those on-street spaces are still available, but someone who has to park there would have to pay whatever the market rate is for that spot. But also the thought is that people that are paying for that may find other alternatives, and so those on-street stalls, the price only is going to be what it needs to be in order to make sure that there is a spot available for you. Some people may choose to live in a different location, in a different complex, so that they have access to that parking.
Wait.
Rent may have to go up in some of those places because they have paid to put in that parking. And other places who have not paid to put in off-street parking may have to lower their rates in order to attract people that are willing to not have a car. But right now, we are using a public resource, the on-street space. We are using a public resource that costs a lot to build, it costs a lot to maintain, and we're subsidizing the complexes that do not have sufficient off-street parking. And when I was talking about redevelopment, right now we have some of the worst offenders, the ones that have the least amount of off-street parking, are getting subsidized the most. And these are often, some, not always, but often, they're the most run down. But if someone's going to come in and purchase that and tear it down and put in a better complex that's going to house more students or whatever, they can't afford to buy them subsidized by the public and then have to turn around and have the city say, well, you have to put in 85% of stalls or 85% of your bedrooms or something like that. So right now, it's actually that the government is interfering with the free market, which is causing a lot of these problems. We see tax for those spots. Well, okay, next question.
So obviously you guys have tried to tell us that you have the best interest in mind. My question is, how is this a more effective plan than using lots that already exist in Provo? This includes church lots, business lots, parking complex lots that pay huge fees for parking, that just remain empty. I understand that these are private property, but why can't private owners be incentivized to allow students to park in their otherwise empty lots overnight? Especially when you mentioned how if a company were to come in and create a new lot, they would have to provide like 85% parking. Why can't you guys just do that instead?
Dave?
It would just be great if we could. I'm really appreciative that you're all here. It was maybe like 2 years ago, and you're at practice. Now I'm the person who's just on the council. I want to answer your question. You found the answer, right? It's that these are. Allow some spots. And there's a private business. I don't think it's one.
How we doing? Oh, wow. Okay. So what I was saying is you asked the question, why can't people park in non-city lots, if you will? And you answered the question, and that's private property. And so if you wanted to park in the Macy's parking lot overnight, Macy's owns that property and could have your car towed. Could the city pay some kind of incentive to allow students to park there? Yes, that's absolutely possible. We would likely have to raise taxes, and we would likely get a lot of pushback from people who don't need that resource, right? So if we were to, for example, say, all right, we want to pay this business that's next to Provo High so that the students of Provo High can park in that lot on behalf of the school district, that means the entire city is paying for Provo High's resource and for those cars to be parked in that lot. So it doesn't necessarily come across as fair to people who aren't using that resource. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I'm just wondering again, as mentioned over here, it sounds like there are ways to incentivize places, especially housing complexes, to provide more parking for residents. And so why is that not an issue? As well as even if taxes were to be raised, it would still open up more parking spaces than the paper parking thing would. So in my opinion, it would be a better solution.
Yeah, so with the tax issue, if we were to raise taxes in order to provide, would it be free parking? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, like, yeah, taxes would be raised, but there would be more spots available, which would then help the issue of not having enough spots for people to park in versus not raising taxes, but then still charging students and targeting students by charging them in that area, only for no more spots to be opened up. Because in my opinion, if this is implemented, then students are going to park in other places to avoid paying. And then that's just going to move the parking issue to different spots.
Yeah, and you're right about that analysis. I'm afraid that any kind of parking management program could push people into other areas where they can park for free. I personally, I won't speak for the other six counselors, I don't feel comfortable asking the entire city to pay for this parking lot that only a few people are using, because we do have the opportunity to require the individual user to pay for what the individual user is using. So I hope that makes sense.
Okay, let's take a question online. Sorry.
Okay. Anna Wolford, would you go ahead and hit *6 to unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
So my question is, I understand that this is going to be generating a revenue. And so will this revenue be strictly just for the upkeep and maintenance of this parking system that we have? I just kind of am curious as to where my money will be going.
Okay, let's take an answer.
Wonderful question. It is something that we have discussed. Right now, there's not anything written in the code or in the proposal for a commitment, which I'm a little uncomfortable with. But what has been discussed is first, the program needs to pay for itself. I don't think there's any way that it doesn't, because if this is fairly efficient to be able to determine if someone's violating. And so enforcement should be very efficient. And if there's not enough violations going on to pay for the person that's checking, then we've got such high compliance, we need to be enforcing less frequently. So I don't see any way that doesn't pay for itself. And then if the user fees that, to pay for the time where it's in demand is insufficient to pay for the program, then that means there's not enough demand there to warrant a parking zone in that area. So I have no doubt that this will generate revenue, and something that has been discussed over and over again, I pushed hard for, but currently is not actually in the code, but I think that there's a desire to do this and kind of a commitment to do this, is that any excess money that's generated in this parking area would remain in this parking area for improvements to the streetscape, improvements to better crosswalks, lighted crosswalks. Maybe it's whatever those type of things. Perhaps it helps pay to fill in some of those really deep irrigation Gutters, thank you. Maybe it helps pay for some diagonal parking to increase the number of parking spaces that are available. So again, it's not written in the code, but I think that's the direction that we're going. And I'm a strong advocate that any excess should be used to improve the environment in the parking area itself.
Yeah, Dave.
Could I do a quick follow-up on the previous
Please.
question?
Yeah, of course.
I thought a good point was raised there that we're not viewing this as the total solution. We need to be looking at a lot of different angles on this. And so the question about incentives, I thought was a good one. Let me just give one quick example of a type of regulation.
Thank you, Mike's off.
Hold it closer. Okay, sorry. Is that better? So let me give you a quick example. I was driving by the Village the other night, and I noticed there were about 20 or 25 visitor stalls on both sides of the building, so maybe 40 to 50 spaces total, something like that. And at night, they're completely empty, and there's in fact, there's a posted sign that says you'll get towed if you park there at night. And so I don't know if there's a city regulation that is causing that situation, but it seems like it would be ideal if it could be used for visitor parking during the day and for the residents at night. That would, free up more spots. So there may be things like that we can look at, changing some of our regulations and incentives and things like that.
Thank you. Yeah.
My name's Emery. I live in Provo. My question is kind of just like a same iteration of what everyone else is saying, I think. So like say we have this system, it's put in place and people pay to park on the street now instead of parking there for free. Where do we expect all the cars to go? Because we obviously all are still going to live there. Where are we all going to go? How is it going to free up space? And I guess kind of a follow up, because you guys have said that there's these spots that are open that have these towed signs. How is it more efficient to charge for parking than address that first and free up those spots first? If we think that is like a viable option, like why haven't we gone there first before charging?
Those lots are private property. And so it's difficult to go in and say, you purchased that, it's yours, but we're going to tell you that you have to allow people to park there overnight. But that is there. And you asked like, where are we going to go? Part of it is we're not reducing anything. We're not reducing the number of on-street stalls. And so if just a couple of people, if a relatively small amount of people do something different, it frees it up. And so whatever that cost needs to be. And so it's only the people who decide they don't want to pay that market rate need to find another place, but that does open up a market. And whether that's, some, it's not a lot, but there are some complexes that have more off-street parking than they need. It now becomes something that maybe they can sell some of those spaces or rent, I guess, some of those spaces to another complex that doesn't have them. Those kind of things aren't happening now because it's free to park on the street. But when there's a cost, now people are creative and say, well, okay, I need to I don't want to pay the $40 a month to park on the street. So what other options do I have? It creates that market, and the market can decide, people can be creative and inventive on, hey, here's an opportunity that I can provide. And so that's how we get better usage of off-street spaces. And again, it doesn't have to be a lot because we're not taking away any of those on-street spaces.
I kind of get it. Sorry, I don't want to take away time. Just like quick follow up. So it seems like we're putting like a charge and a fee on students and people that live there in order to like push businesses and push complexes to make like a decision, which seems like super backwards to me.
So part of this absolutely has to be that you guys need to make choices, what's in your best interest about where you rent. And so I've heard people complain that we're paying for off-street spaces, and when we're being charged, or they're selling too many of them. So I just paid $40 a month to park, and I can't even find a space. I'm not guaranteed a space. What needs to happen is people need to say, I'm not going to rent there, because that's what they're doing. And what I meant to mention during the initial presentation, BYU has announced changes to their housing policy. You guys will have more flexibility and more options available to you. But I do want to say, we love you guys. We want you here. There is no better place for hopefully you and for the whole community than to have you choose to live in North Joaquin. We want this place to be very attractive to you, and we want you to continue to choose to live in North Joaquin, but you will have the choice. And if a landlord is doing things that make things very difficult, people will have the choice to go somewhere else. And they will have to figure out how to provide parking for you or lower the rates to attract enough people, because they're not going to want to have those empty beds. But between BYU's new policies, which I don't think anyone fully understands what the impact's going to be. Let me say that up front. That's a big, we don't know. But between that and between putting this market-based solution in for parking, it will give people the ability to make the best choice for them, and we're aligning the incentives for that. So,
Thank you.
Okay, an online question.
Yeah, the next speaker is Ben Wiedekind. Sorry if I butchered that.
Hi, Ben.
Am I being heard?
Yes.
So my question is in relation to the equity of this issue. When you're talking about like those who are willing to pay, what I'm hearing is that the wealthy residents or people whose parents pay for parking will be the ones who take up parking spaces on the street. So it seems like a result of this legislation, if it were to pass, which it's very strongly opposed, is that you'd end up with a bunch of segregation based on wealth in parking. And like you've suggested, having people who don't own cars move to like different apartments and like choosing where you're going to be. It seems like this law would really target like college students who don't have money to throw around on parking, who don't have as much money as others, or even like residents. So I have the strong feeling that this law would target those students the most and affect them the most. And are those really the people that you want to be hurting?
Thanks, Ben, for that question. I care a lot about diversity and equity and inclusion. And so these are issues that I think about not just in the context of parking, but in the context of housing, in the context of access to fresh food and grocery stores. This is a broader conversation, so I'm glad you brought it up. I think that in this kind of situation, in many situations, people unfortunately are already sometimes segregated by their income. When my sister went to BYU. No, I don't intend to make it worse. Let me add some context if you can settle down for a sec here. My sister, when she lived at BYU, was not subsidized and lived in a really, really crummy place. And I will not name said complex for their sake, I guess. But people live in really crummy places. Some of you live in really crummy places and it's cheap. Some of you live in really nice places and it's not cheap. And I don't know how or where people are getting their money, how this is financed, but it happens, right? There are nice complexes and there are crummy complexes and there's everything in between. And this is no way is intended to make it worse. But there are costs to owning a vehicle, right? So if you pay for gas, if you pay for insurance, if you pay for an oil change, all of that comes with owning a vehicle. And this is part of that cost at some point is storing your vehicle. And this is not in any way intended to create inequality or a lack of equity, trust me. And I do want to say, this is a proposal that has not been passed by the city council. This is a proposal that has come from the council's parking committee, which consists of 2 councilors. And so there are 7 councilors that are elected. And those 7 councilors may agree or disagree with this proposal at any time. So if one counselor is saying one thing, there's no way to know if every other counselor lines up with that, right? So that's why we're having this conversation, is we're trying to get this information out to you so we can get your feedback so that 7 distinct people can make their own decision and shape this ordinance if it ever passes into something better, something that works for you, something that works for the people that we represent. So don't think that this is a done deal. Don't think that this is on the agenda for next week or next month. And don't think that every counselor has the same opinion of what is being proposed. I hope that answers part of your question.
I'd like to address the cost question briefly too. I would love to see this. Well, the goal is to charge the absolute minimum amount to free up, let's say, 1 spot in 10. Now, I'm just going to throw out some numbers here. This may not be where it ends up, but I would love to see it be something like maybe 50 cents a night or $10 a month, something in that range. And the reason why I think that might be enough is for many years, well, for two reasons. First of all, I think it might be enough to nudge the demand, and I think it might be enough to pay for the costs as well. For many years, the city has charged $15 a year for annual parking permits. That comes out to $1.25 a month. Now that turns out to not be enough to cover the operating costs, so we've started to raise those rates. More recently, it's been $100 a year in these few areas in the city that we need parking permit programs. That comes out to $8.25 a month. So I'm thinking $10 a month is probably, I don't know for sure, probably more than enough to cover the costs of this program because it's such a dense area and you don't have to enforce. In many areas, it would be nighttime only, maybe like Mr. Harding said, maybe just a couple hours during the night. So I'm hoping this will be a really affordable option that will nudge demand just enough to make a difference and make things work a lot better for the parking situation.
All right, let's take a question here.
Howdy. My name is Daniel Christ. I live in Condo Row, which is a pretty good example of, the excess demand for on-street parking. It's always a mess. And I always do have to park like 3 blocks away at night. I'm just out and about, and that's just how classes work and all that kind of stuff. But as I notice, as I'm driving to get spots, that there are so many places where even if lines were drawn in, there'd be so many more spots opened up just because people aren't parking very well. The ability for people to park is not very good in Provo, unfortunately. Just because we're in a rush or anything like that, right? But you go to a parking lot like at Target or anything like that, and you can see lines in them. You usually do a lot better job parking, and it frees a lot of spots up. Is that something you've looked into at all? Because that's a lot better idea than charging, because that does affect our income.
That's a really good point. Good question.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Up until this point, we haven't had with a parking administrator, someone who thinks about this full time, not part time, but full time. This is their only job. I am hopeful that these are the kind of solutions that are coordinated. And right now we don't have that. Right now, I think the policy has been not to do that because when it snows, those lines go away and whatnot. But I absolutely think I think that's a great idea. I think that's something that we should absolutely look into. I hope it's done. And I think with our full-time parking coordinator, I think those are the kind of things that will get done. Another thing, let me piggyback on this. Another thing that we've talked about is diagonal parking for the areas that it makes sense. It doesn't make sense in every area, unfortunately, and it doesn't make sense currently on the ones that have those deep irrigation gutters, which is another reason why if we could get those fixed, we can get more parking. But all of these things, I think, can work together, and I think it will be very valuable to have a full-time person that this is all that they think about. But these kind of ideas, absolutely, I 100% support and hope let me say one other thing. So this is my last month and a half on the council. So I will not be voting on any implementation of a parking management area. You know, that the program will have to convince at least 4 other counselors besides me. And so when I'm saying like, I hope this gets done, that's in part because I'm not going to be here long term, but it absolutely makes sense. And I absolutely hope that it gets implemented like you suggested.
And will there be a place where citizens could kind of send ideas and kind of go into more details, because I do have them?
Yes.
Okay.
The email address for the council, email us as a council to give any ideas. Yeah, there's lots of ways to engage us. You could call any of us. I mean, we'd love to hear more ideas.
Call 311 and ask for the parking manager.
Okay. Thank you.
And that gets to all the counselors, council@provo.org. And we've heard from a lot of you, by the way, and we read them. So we can't always get back to everybody, but we read them. So thank you. Let's take somebody online.
Ken Varga.
Ken.
I'm sorry, Ken Varga. I've had several students attend. I live in Anaheim, California, and I've got a student in this area right now. I think the estimates are that up to $1 billion is the impact on the Provo City area from BYU students and having the university there. They pay a 1.1% sales tax for every purchase in the city. So I'd be curious what benefits that you are giving to the students that directly impact them. Obviously, they're not attending the schools in general that are being paid for out of taxes. What is that 1.1% that they are paying for every purchase in the city going for and benefiting them directly? And why should they keep those dollars in Provo rather than using their cards to go to Orem to buy those same products in Orem?
So what do the taxes go to?
What do the taxes go to? Raise your hand if you're a poli-sci major. Okay, we got 1, 2, excellent. 3, love to see it. Thank you. This is what your taxes go to. Your taxes go to funding the fire department, their salaries. It goes to the police department, goes to the public works department. We pay a lot of engineers to run our public works department. We pay millions, maybe billions of dollars in infrastructure every year. So the roads that you drive and park on, the gutters, that's a stormwater collection system. That's above ground and below ground. The treatment of stormwater. When you pay your taxes, that helps us maintain the sewer system. It helps us pull water out of the aquifer so that we can provide water in your pipes. We also use your taxes to create a conveyance system and maintain a conveyance system for culinary water. Your taxes go to parks, goes to the people who mow the lawns at the parks. It goes to the water that goes on the park lawns. It goes to the golf course, the rec center, the library. What else does our taxes go to?
It funds our government. I mean, this building and the elections that I hope you're participating in. I hope tonight is an indication of your interest in being involved in local politics on a regular basis, because we really want and need your input. I represent District 2, which is a good portion of Joaquin and the student body. I'm a professor at BYU. I try to engage BYU students all the time, and I'm always wanting more to hear from you on this issue, but lots of others. I hope this isn't the only issue that brings you out, but the tax money that you pay makes democracy possible in this community. So I don't think there's any question that we care and for you, and that you benefit from the tax money that you're paying, because we all do.
Do you think that the students are benefiting at the same proportion as the rest of the residents of the city? Because you indicated earlier that you thought that subsidizing the students by doing some of these things in this area would be unfair to the other members of the city. And it seems like you're trying to have it both ways. I don't believe, having been a student there as well, that we participate in using some of these pieces at the same rate. And finally, I just state, I think if you're not listening to the students, the mayor only received just over 8,000 votes with 33,000 people attending BYU. The ability to get their own slate of candidates in here who are supportive of the students is definitely a possibility.
Yeah, I'd like you to name one thing that Counselor Ellsworth just mentioned that the students don't benefit from. I don't understand the equity issue you're raising. There's no way to there's no way to rate that proportionately. Everybody's benefiting from I'm saying that, look, I'm not even sure that I support this program, okay? I'm here to listen. And Counselor Ellsworth made that very clear that there's 7 of us who are going to eventually have to make a decision on whether or not this is the right way to go. So I'm not sold on it. I'm very sensitive to the costs that are impacted on students. I'm fighting to keep the towing fees down for you guys, which is a totally separate issue. And I'm going to hear any concerns you have. I've been beating this drum for 4 years to get students more involved in the city. So I want to know how we can serve you better. That's one of my highest priorities. So this isn't coming from a position of trying to justify a parking program. I'm just saying there's no question that taxes benefit everybody in the community. And I don't care who the person is who's paying the tax, it benefits everybody because the services that go into making a civilization run are extraordinary and they're often invisible, and we should value and be grateful for those, independent of how you feel about this issue. Okay, just the fact that we can drive on streets and vote in a democracy and have fire and police show up at our home when there's an emergency is a blessing. So I'm sorry, I won't apologize for the way in which your tax money benefits you, because it benefits me too in exactly the same way.
Yeah, and I just want to add, it is absolutely critical that students are involved and represented in their government. And I am thrilled that so many people are here tonight. And I wish this many students showed up to the polls to vote. I wish that students were registered in Provo to vote, because you don't even need a Utah driver's license to vote in our municipal elections. And this impacts you more than our federal elections. So please register to vote. Please represent yourself. Please elect candidates who represent you. Use your vote, use your voice, participate. But across the country, there's this incredible, terrifying trend that people under 25 don't register to vote in the town where they go to college. And I wish it was different. One of the reasons I ran for office was to represent underdogs. And I constantly think about students, and I donate my time to local universities to talk about these issues with students. And we need you to come to the voting polls, to come to the booth and check a box and mail your ballot so that your voice can be heard. Please do that.
All right, here in the room.
Yeah, so first off, just want to say thank you to the city council members for trying to help us and trying to make Provo better for us. A lot of negative feelings sometimes about this, but thank you for trying to help us. And then my other question is, if the proposed plan goes through, it seems like the proposed plan will be good at kind of pushing around some of the demand so it evens out more. But what about the areas that are extremely high demand, more so than what the proposed parking plan may be able to mitigate? Because there's a couple examples of apartment complexes. My cousin stays in one where they give out parking passes for the residents, but there is more residents than there is parking passes. And so I guess that's my question for those areas, that there just is not enough parking, those extremely high demand areas, because then it would just be those students just continually paying for their parking pass. I'm just wondering if you have different plans for extremely high demand areas versus day parking for students going to campus back and forth, things like that.
Great question. Let me ask, if you talked about a cousin that had his situation. I assume it was a he, sorry. Your cousin's situation is given a parking pass, off-street parking pass.
So no, they buy a parking pass for their apartment complex. Right. Okay. So they have a parking pass, but their complex, let's say it's a complex of 100 people, only has 50 spots. 75 of those people have cars, right?
And 75% buy the pass. It's not given to them. It's not part of their rent.
They purchase the pass.
Okay. In part, hopefully people are saying if that's unreasonable, then they should be looking somewhere else to rent. And that's the best way to change those practices. But right now, the street is free. And so right now, some, not all, some landlords are just saying, well, Go fight it out on the street. It's another option. If it becomes how this program is set up for the places of the highest demand, the cost is going to be the highest to park there. And so some people are saying, well, if I can't get a parking spot there, I don't want to pay $2 a night to park here. So I need to either choose to not have a car. If that's not an option, I need to find a different place to rent. And if enough people choose that, then that place needs to change something in order to keep their beds filled. They'll need to reduce their rent, or they'll need to partner with a nearby business in order to provide more parking. Something has to change. So that's the market working there. And so my short answer,
I got a follow-up question.
Places that have the highest demand, it's going to cost the most to park there. And then places that have lower demand, it will have less charge to park there. And places with no demand or not excess demand, then people can park for free.
Okay, so just a consideration on that basis of like the demand and the cost and all those things. Me and my wife manage a couple of apartment complexes that we work for. And, so we kind of see both sides. So my question is, there's like, I think you brought it up earlier, like the crappy apartments versus the nice apartments, right? I mean, if you just left it up to the market, hopefully the crappy apartments over time would tend to fix themselves and be upgraded, right? And then people would be driven towards more of the medium apartments instead of having to choose the really crappy places. But we still see in Provo, the market, the costs are continually rising. I'm not like an econ major, right? I don't know a ton about that, but in the apartment complexes that we manage, even our really trashiest unit that we have, our landlord was like, should we raise the cost of that? Because it's getting really easy to sell the contracts for all of our apartments, like ridiculously easy. So my question is, how would competition in parking be able to drive costs when like quality of apartments is not being able to do that? Like,
right. So it's parking becomes, the cost of parking becomes one more parameter that needs to be weighed in people's choice where to rent. Now, again, right now, you're quite limited on the area in which you can rent. That changes this coming fall. Again, I hope, I'm not going to be on much longer, but I hope the city is really tuned into this and doing whatever we can to make North Joaquin the best place to live and as attractive as possible to keep people there, because you will have greater options coming up. Right now, some of those less desirable apartments, really old houses that really should be redeveloped, have very little parking. And so they're being subsidized because they're relying on the free on-street parking. And anyone who wants to redevelop that not only has to pay them the top dollar because they're being subsidized.
Can you explain what the subsidization is that you're talking about?
Yes, sorry. If I want to build an apartment building right now, the city is going to say you have to provide, a stall for 0.85 of your beds. So you have 100. You're putting in 100 beds. You have to have 85 stalls. Those run different numbers depending on configuration, but we'll call it an average of $20,000 for a surface spot. That makes it very expensive, and there are apartment complexes here that provide that parking because they were forced to. Now they depending on their quality or whatever, they can charge more for rent or less for rent or whatever, but they're competing against places that have been there since the 20s and have very little off-street stalls. And so their parking, their cost of parking is subsidized. They don't have to pay to repave that lot. They don't have to pay for the land that's
not literally subsidized, but just the fact that there's free parking there, like subsidized.
I would say that that's subsidized. It's a subsidy.
It's not like you guys, the city's paying them.
That's true. Okay. Thank you.
That was unclear.
Well, but there's a real cost. I mean, there's a real cost to maintaining and building and continuing with that road. Yeah.
But I see where the confusion is. And what I mean by that is they don't have to pay for parking, but they compete against people that do have to pay for parking. And they're less likely to be redeveloped because anyone who comes in will have to put in all of that parking. And so it is reducing the amount of supply in this area, which is driving up demand, drives up prices. If we can get some of these places redeveloped, we will reduce that demand pressure and hopefully I'm not going to say it's going to lower rent. It never goes down. Housing costs doesn't never go down, but at least we can
That'd be a miracle.
decrease. Yeah, it would be. We can at least decrease that upward pressure on rents because we're able to allow the area to provide more beds.
Thank you. We'll take a question online.
M. Moyler.
Yes, my question is that you're saying that this program does not reduce the amount of parking, but in fact, the design of it reduces the amount of parking because you're trying to target the price to free up one spot. So you've 1 in 10 is what I heard. So you just reduce the parking by 10%. Where the issue is, there's not enough parking, and so I'm questioning. There's no guarantee that the landowners that have available space will do anything, nor that there's even land available in the given area. And so this program just incurs a fee, reduces parking, and causes students to have to park further away from where they live.
Counselors?
Point well taken. It is designed to free up one space per block face, so that is true. It would reduce between 8 and 10%. There are currently more off-street spaces in Joaquin than there are vehicles, but they're definitely not all available, and they're not necessarily distributed in a way. So all of that is true, but there are also things that we're looking at doing with the parallel parking, opening up other lots and whatnot, but also, the creation of redevelopment that will have more parking. Often the most egregious, people with the least amount of off-street parking are the oldest complexes and houses that have been converted. So, encouraging that redevelopment is also another aspect.
Glad that you're seeing that, because that seems to be the bigger issue, is how to increase the amount of available parking. And unfortunately, the design of this program is doing just the opposite.
So I just wanted to add one thought. This is, again, independent of, this is not stated in support of this program, of the idea of a fee, but I just want to make a plug for the fact that all of us are in this together in terms of our air quality and in terms of our quality of life and in terms of our environment. And so the sooner and we can wean ourselves of automobiles, the better. I know that that's not a luxury that some of you can afford at this point in your life. I totally understand that. But if there's a way in which you can make a commitment to reduce your dependence on the automobile, you're going to be helping collectively solve a problem that we're all facing. We are going to try to offer e-bikes in Provo, and we hope that will help people feel more incentivized to get off of their automobiles. I bike everywhere in Provo. I don't find that it's difficult to get anywhere within the city. I know many of you have to work at longer distances. I'm not trying to shame anybody who has to do that. But if you can, and I've had to say this to my own children, I live in Provo, and my own children at different times felt they needed a car in Joaquin. And I was like, well, I don't know if that's the best use of that car. So if there's ways in which you can consider, reducing your car trips with your roommates, and I'm trying to convince BYU to do what other universities have been doing and incentivizing students not to bring cars to campus, because it just makes life a lot more livable for everybody. That's on us to help you have the infrastructure, the safe walking, the mass transit, and the other kinds of benefits that would make that a more attractive option. And we're trying very hard to make that happen at the same time. But I just wanted to throw that out there as something that's one prong among many prongs of an approach that we need to try to look at so that we can reduce this problem.
This guy. as was stated earlier, we are open to new ideas. We're open to your ideas. We're open to fresh alternatives. So if you have friends that go to different universities in this state and other states, talk to them. See how do they get to campus? Where do they park? What is their situation like? What are they paying for? What has the city or the university done to improve or discourage or promote or enhance their transportation experience? So send us your ideas and be innovative and think about what is occurring in other places and should we adopt that model here?
Okay, we have about 40 minutes left, so let's both question and answer as fast as we can. Next.
I was just curious about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the data that you gathered and whether or not that influenced the numbers of parking spots that you saw available on street, off street, in apartment complexes, and how to accommodate for apartment complexes that do have more than sufficient number of parking spots for their needs versus those who don't.
I think that's a good question. We're how do I say this? Our staff is really, really smart, and they're not counting stalls over Christmas when we suspect that most students are away from Provo, right? And the staff in Provo has been counting stalls, has been counting filled stalls and unfilled stalls over how many, like 20 years probably, at least. And so we do our very best to use data. We don't try and skew it when, you know, you're away at Christmas. That's not the point. We want something that works for you. We really do. You want to?
Super quick. The beauty of the parking management area is that it is flexible and only happens where the demand is excessive. And so even if our numbers are old, or even if something new changes, even if BYU radically changes their housing policy and throws everything up in the air, it's flexible to respond to that. And so if there's a bad count somewhere and something gets put in, if the demand isn't there, it immediately gets taken back out. It's flexible that way.
Just one other follow-up, if I might. With regard to the question of how does this affect complexes that have sufficient off-street parking? In one way, I want to say it doesn't affect them too much because the residents there have a place to park and they don't need to park on street, but it does affect them in another way, is that those complexes become a little bit more valuable because they do have sufficient parking. So there may be a little bit of adjustment of rent that goes on where the ones that don't may have to lower their rent or vice versa.
Do you have an estimate for how long it will take the market to balance after like implementing this, and how we can see the parking demands balance the market after that?
I think we're all committed to, if this gets implemented, it will be implemented early enough that people can make their contract decisions. So I think that's a safe commitment to say, even if I'll be off the council by the time it's done. But I think everyone's committed to that. It takes 2 weeks from when a change is determined that it's needed and the notice goes out, and then it can change. I do think that it will take probably up to 2 years for someone to say, hey, you know, I no longer need these spaces, and so I can rent them out to whoever wants them. I think some of those things, it will take some time for the market to respond. I'm guessing most of that will happen in the first semester. It'll probably trail out for up to a couple of years, but even I think landlords, property managers and whatnot will have to make changes as well. And so then it'll need to rebalance again.
So online question, please.
Wait, could we have the person who just asked a question state her name for the record? We're missing a few people along the way.
Anna Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Adam Hill.
Hi, so my name is Adam Hill. I live in the King Henry general area. From your comments, it sounds like you're trying to if I understand you correctly, you're not trying to put pressure on students, but instead trying to put pressure on the housing market to provide better housing options. To me, it sounds like that's what you're trying to push for with this change in policy, is just to improve the quality of housing and improve the competition for housing and who parks well. Is that correct?
Yes, I like how you put that. I would say that we are trying to get the government out of skewing the market by providing free parking where there's excessive demand and allowing the market to respond because we're offering free parking. It has these negative unintended consequences of tamping down on redevelopment and incentivizing things that affect our negatively affect our air quality. So yes, we're trying to get the government out of the way in order to allow the market to do what it does best.
Okay.
Question here.
Gavin Thornburg. I live next to the old Provo Library. I have a few caveats. Number one, thank you guys. Number two, I'm in Econ 110 right now with Professor Curl. Supply and demand. We understand what's trying to be done here, okay? But my question has to do with a statement that was made that you guys care for us and are doing this parking thing in our best interest. I don't have doubt for other programs, but for this one, you've said with this parking structure, you care for us, right? 80% of BYU of students in this area or citizens in this area have said no. The last time I heard something like this, it was when King George III tried to tax our tea, right? So my question is, when so many of BYU students, and I'll just say BYU students, have said no, a vast majority, 80%, as our representatives, why is this still going forward?
I'll take a shot at this, the King George issue. I mostly came to listen tonight. You need to know that this thing isn't in concrete. And some of us think that we ought to defer any implementation until a couple of things happen. One is until we get a new parking director, with the benefit of his evaluation, his ideas. The other is we really need to see what effect BYU's new housing policy is going to have. We really don't want to create unintended consequences until we have a better sense of things, okay? So, number one, I appreciate you all coming, particularly those who come with ideas, as well as good questions. I want to thank you on behalf of the council for not coming with torches and pitchforks. Please understand that our motives are good. We have a problem here. I hope you appreciate that. We have a problem. We have greater demand than supply. With all deference to Professor Curl, who's a good friend, the fact is that we have a problem and we got to deal with it. And we're trying to be as creative and as thoughtful as we can. A good friend of mine, my partner, is fond of saying that it's a mighty rare pancake that doesn't have two sides. And in fact, this is a multifaceted problem. There are a lot of stakeholders, a lot of issues, complicated by past decisions, some poor decisions in the city. And so here we are, right? But we have to deal with it. We just can't stick our heads in the sand. So, my hope is that you'll appreciate that, we're trying our best. It's a very complicated issue. Everyone here on this isn't a dais, is it? Everybody here in this panel, everybody in the city council is well-intended. We heard you snicker at the first slide and said we love our students, right? Well, we do. We love BYU. I mean, we have a beloved professor here. We have people here who have degrees. I'm an old student body president going back about 100 years. Served on the alumni board, as Cougar Club president, checked all those boxes. I love BYU. I'm BYU blue to the bone. BYU is nothing without you students, right? It'd be a very pleasant ghost town. And basically what we want is for you guys to have as good an experience at the Y as we did. But we have a problem, and so we got to deal with it. Just understand that it's a hard problem. We put one of our best men on the parking committee 4 years ago. He's a brilliant engineer by profession, and he's applied that brilliant mind to the problem and tried to find incentives and disincentives that correspond to market forces. And what he's coming up with is not bad. We just don't know the end game yet. It's still going to take some time. So we welcome your ideas. Thanks very much.
I have an idea just briefly. If my if my econ first exam says anything, it says that I understand that this is a complex issue by my grade. Does that make sense? Thank you. You want to share that with us? That's I'll email the council directly. But I would like to add, there's more than one solution. Maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board and just keep in mind of those we represent and what we said. Thank you.
Before you leave, can I make a request of you?
Sure.
I want you to go back to Jim Curl, Professor Curl, and invite him to serve on our parking committee.
Ooh. Where's the camera?
Careful what you wish for.
Help us solve this problem.
So the first slide did say that we love our students. And I know that to me, it sounds cheesy, but it is true. And I genuinely care about the students who live here. I genuinely care about the underdog. When I was inaugurated to office almost 2 years ago, I referenced Harry Potter because Harry Potter's an underdog. And I love Harry Potter and I love underdogs. So don't think that I'm not looking out for you. Don't think that we're not looking out for you, right? And so when I was in the council meeting on Tuesday and I said there are about 200 responses that say students or people or human citizens who live in this area are opposed to this, and that, I said this to my colleagues, I said if this was a land use issue and 200 people were opposed to it, it would not pass. And those are things that we consider. And this is not going to be implemented tomorrow. It's not going to be on the agenda tomorrow. Like I said, this will come after further deliberation, after you've sent us many good ideas, after we have talked about this ad nauseum. When you are in graduate school, we will be talking about this. And I want to give you all my personal cell phone number, so pull out your phone. Here's how I can prove that I care about students. My cell phone number is 801-900-3217. Now my phone's going to light up. That's it.
I just want to say Shannon and I are also going to be meeting on campus on BYU campus December 2nd at 7:30, I think. And I'm forgetting that. It was? No, JSB. Sorry. If you'll email me at georgebhandley@gmail, I can give you the information. But we want to talk about other issues that concern you to prove that we care for you. We don't think parking is insignificant, but this is not the only thing that I think concerns your lives. So we would really hope you would come and give us your perspective on how the city can serve you better. But December 2nd, 7:30, location on campus TBA. Sorry, I think we were still, I thought it was Joseph Smith Building basement, but maybe it was JFSB. You know how some people confuse those two, but we'll figure that out.
Okay, so next question in the room.
My name's Cutter Nielsen. I live in Joaquin. I guess just on a first note, I feel like obviously the parking issue, it affects students the most. And I would say that the majority of students would probably much rather walk a few blocks and have to pay. So I feel like it reaches the point of the solution becomes worse than the problem. But my thought process is, right now the status quo is obviously free parking, and everyone is obviously upset about that. And so there's a chance that, people move and they change their housing situation. And so that, there's less cars, less people in Joaquin. Eventually though, that would become the status quo. People would become used to parking, having to pay to park. That would bring people back, and that same amount of cars would most likely be here. I think it's hard to say that less people would have cars. So then at what point does it turn into, we still have the parking problem, but now we're paying still with the parking problem? How do we address these hypotheticals?
I'll just comment quickly. Then we go back to the drawing board, right? And there have been parking permit programs that have been revised or canceled or changed. Like this, it is an evolving situation. We're not going to implement this today because we are waiting to see what happens with BYU's housing policy. And when BYU changed their housing policy, I celebrated because I thought now students can find something more affordable, hopefully higher quality. They can find something that works for them. And maybe they haven't been able to find that in the past. So we are open to an evolving iteration, to different versions, to nothing at all, to, we're open to ideas. Send us your ideas and we'll be looking for your feedback after it's implemented.
I would say in the history of government that once we implement things, we really don't go back on them. We're not going to remove these things that say you have to pay to park here. So I feel like once it was implemented, we wouldn't go back to the drawing board, that this would be the status quo, this would be here to stay, which I think is the concern with this, is that once it's here, even if it has negative effects, we typically don't go back on things in government, and we're not going to remove these concrete things in the ground that say you have to pay to park here.
Yeah, I think that's a really important concern. I did my graduate studies in Berkeley, California, where the demand for parking was ridiculous and the supply for parking was ridiculous. I'm not an econ person at all, but I'm pretty sure that's a problem in my rough calculation. And it was hundreds of dollars a month easily this was back in the 1990s for parking. So I mean, that's why I say this is also an issue of sustainability. And again, I don't want to sound insensitive to anyone who's dependent on an automobile, but that's not the future. It can't be. We cannot all be driving cars and our population growing. Our population is estimated to grow in this valley by 2050 to be the size of Salt Lake City. So the demand for parking in Provo is going to continue to be an insane problem. And that's why we're trying very desperately to develop the mass transit we need in the city and to make Front Runner go all the way down to Payson and the UVX going up through Orem, so that people can get to more places of work without having to drive. So there's a whole other side of this that we're just not talking about that I hope you're also thinking about and investing in, because I honestly don't think it's a sustainable solution. I think we just have to figure out ways to get off of the car.
Yeah, just super quick follow-up. Did you feel that parking, like there was available parking when you were at Berkeley, that even though you were having to pay, no. And that's the answer to this.
I had to walk miles.
So the paying to park didn't fix the problem there?
Well, I actually, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I'm describing the sort of scenario that I think you were alluding to. That's all.
Okay, thank
I
you.
did actually, I will confess, I cheated because as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there was an institute and they let me park there occasionally, but I also mostly biked.
Okay, thank you.
So let's take a question online, please.
Darren, would you speak to us, please?
Yes, I'm Darren.
Last name?
I think he was going to say he's in support of this. I think that was that was the next line. Darren, any follow-up? All right. We got a supporter. Somebody here in the room.
My name is Joe Lichty. I have lived at Liberty Square and I live at Condo Row. I'm in my 5th year, so I've been gathering data on parking for 5 years, which is not quite 20. I guess as I've been listening, I think that it was interesting what you said a few seconds ago that maybe BYU's change in housing requirements will solve this problem. But I guess the thing that I find interesting is that you've said several times that that there is more parking than there are cars in Joaquin, more off-street parking than there are cars. And I know that the building codes require new complexes to provide a spot for every like 1.2 or so residents. So I guess the thing that I've noticed as I've lived here, especially in places like Liberty Square and the Village, is that residents, while they're protected in terms of having to have parking spots on the complex, they're not really protected in terms of how the management companies sell them those spots or deal with those spots. And when I lived at Liberty Square, most people didn't park on the street or in the parking lot the second year I lived there because Liberty Square chose to raise their parking pass prices from $30 a month to $60 a month, which is a lot. And, you know, when you don't make enough money to even have to pay taxes, that's a lot. So I guess, have you guys thought about about ways to deal with this problem that use the current parking spaces. For example, requiring apartment complexes to either fold the cost of a parking pass into rent and provide a certain number for each complex, or to approach other solutions like that, where the parking is included with, like, not only is it required that there is parking, but it's required that that parking is available to the residents. Because I think something like that would solve this problem a lot faster and a lot easier than requiring students to pay to park on the street.
Thank you for the question. I would argue the opposite. I think that when parking is rolled into the rent, then people who it incentivizes, there's no penalty for, or there's no incentive to not bring your car. And again, that's not a solution for most people, but some people may have that option. And so if I can save $60 a month by not having a car, maybe it becomes worth it to me. And if it's rolled into the rent, then people don't have that option. One of the big things that I hope is that by having on-street parking, potentially you have to pay for it in the areas of highest demand, then you as consumers will make that one of the parameters you ask when you sign these contracts. And you ask, what am I going to do with my car? What does it cost? Will I be guaranteed a space if I pay for off-street parking? And make that part of your decision process when you decide where to sign your contract with. Because that, I think, will help move the needle and will help some of the practices that I hear the most complaints about, hopefully will go away because people are choosing to rent somewhere else.
So I guess maybe my question then is, what is the city council doing to help protect renters from landlords that maybe abuse their renters? Because that happens a lot, honestly. And especially parking is a really visible example of it. And it's maybe what is bringing this issue up. But like that happened a lot to us when I lived at Liberty Square. Redstone Residential definitely tried to take every penny that they could from us. Yeah. And we didn't have any really power to fight them on that. So I feel like a paid policy for street parking is not actually going to really fix that issue. And I think that issue is more what is causing this problem with having more cars on the street than in off-street parking.
So we have a law in Provo that every automobile being operated from a property needs to have an off-street stall. So that is a law that's been here for at least 60 years, and I don't know how far back it goes. It's difficult to enforce that. It's difficult to enforce that. I know there are responsible landlords out there that will make people sign the contracts that when their spaces are full, anyone that they rent to, they have to sign that they won't bring a car, but people still will bring cars because the street's free. In one of the reasons is because the street is free. And so likewise, it's very difficult to say, to a property manager, you have to have enough off-street stalls, because they're going to be able to say, well, we only rent to the people, to the number of people that bring cars, and so we don't know where all these other cars are showing up on street. That is something that we already have in place. So it's difficult for us to do more than that as far as enforcing.
I guess I don't really feel like it's in place in a way that really helps the situation, but that's okay. I'm glad that there is something.
There's something, but I agree. It's not very effective. I think that this program does make those things effective. But one of the biggest things, though, is BYU's policy change. You will have a broader area to look for housing. So that's going to, and again, by no means am I asking people to move away from North Joaquin. We need to do a better job, including with our partners. We need to do a better job to make North Joaquin even more attractive. And that's the reason why I'm proposing this program. I think it will make it more attractive, but we can disagree on that. That's fine. But you will have those broader options. And you guys need to be informed consumers. You need to understand the contracts that you're signing. And when people are taking advantage of you, you need to do what you can to make sure people know that these are the things that are happening here, and they're only going to really react when their beds are not full, and that's when practices become better.
So we have more people left to speak than have already spoken. We've got about 10 online, and we've got another almost 20 here. I think we've got more than that even. So my thought at this point, unless there's objection, is to let everybody comment or question, but not have responses so that we can hear from everybody. And then maybe take a little bit at the end to maybe comment on what we've heard, but not try to react to every single question. So if you can be brief, please, so we can listen to everybody. I'm not going to hard stop it at 8:00, and so you guys are welcome to leave whenever you want. But we're here to listen. That was the primary purpose here tonight, and so just let's see if we can get as many as possible.
I will do this again, even if it's just a room that I rent at the library. And if people have questions and want to talk, I would love to talk with you about this.
Yeah, sorry, no more lining up though, because we do need to get through everybody. Okay, so let's go. Name and neighborhood is still important for the record.
Tanner Picard, Carterville neighborhood, recent Exodus member from Joaquin. My goal at BYU was to not use a car while I was there. I was successful in almost every regard except for trying to get groceries. The entire Joaquin neighborhood has maybe one corner store plus 7-Eleven. I try not to buy groceries at 7-Eleven for obvious reasons.
The sushi's good though.
Not the next day. But my question is, what are some of the efforts that the council is trying to undertake in getting some of that redevelopment going in the area to bring in some of that mixed use zoning to better bring in a more walkable neighborhood like expressed in the South Joaquin neighborhood plan?
Thank you. Next question.
Dave. Hi, I'm Brock Allen. I also live in the Carterville neighborhood. I live at Alpine Village, and I park on the street. And I think my biggest problem with what I've heard today is a lot of like the benefits from this policy come from relying on the free market and the people who run the apartment buildings. And I've been in the trenches for about 2 years now. And every time I've trusted like the apartment building or my fate is up to them, I've been burned, like I can't trust them anymore. And so it's really difficult for me to hear that this will help adjust and balance the market when that's not what I've seen. And it's really hard for me to see anybody be in support of this if you don't know exactly how it's going to affect the students, So.
Thank you. Next question. And we actually, I just said we don't have a hard stop. There's a training that has to be in here. And so we do need to go as fast as we can, get this done.
My name is Matthew Halterman. I live in North Joaquin, proud resident of North Joaquin neighborhood. I don't know how many people I speak for, but I am opposed to meters in North Joaquin. I think it brings up a lot of problems. But my suggestion for you, I'm glad to hear that you're open-minded and are open to other ideas. You mentioned like super parkers, people who just park forever. My suggestion would be to give a free or reduced rate to verifiable students and residents who can verify through the app or whatever, which then disincentivizes people to park for a month or to park for BYU games or whatever it is.
Next.
Meters are not part of the proposal, by the way. No meters.
My name is Dylan Sindrich. I live in the Joaquin neighborhood, and I'm a BYU student. I'm actually studying planning, and I just want to say that I am in complete support of this proposal for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. I think Provo needs to be doing everything they can to disincentivize driving and make it easier for students to bike, to walk, to take public transit. It seems like the bigger issue to me is that students feel like not having a car isn't an option. And I think that that says more about our public transit and our pedestrian infrastructure than anything else. And so I would like to see from the council commitment. If I was going to really support this proposal, I'd like to see a firm commitment that the funds raised from the parking fees would go directly into public transit improvements, pedestrian improvements, cyclist improvements, and in promoting mixed use development.
Thank you.
And I think that's another plug for redevelopment and bringing your daily destinations to North Joaquin. Wouldn't it be great if you could get a job in Joaquin?
Sorry,
Well,
we got to wait. We got to keep going.
Sorry, I'll try to be brief. My name is Ben Harwood. I'm a resident of Joaquin neighborhood as well. Just to briefly introduce myself, I am an independent. I'm a student at BYU. I pay for my tuition. I pay for my rent, all that stuff. Unfortunately, on like any government program, they go off your 2019 tax records, and that is when I was on my mission for my church. And so I was obviously dependent. So I don't qualify for any of those programs. I know there's a lot of other students like me. So I just want to just kind of briefly introduce myself there, and also to know that I am a full-time working as well, to be able to provide for my own food, everything like that. I'm going to have to take off this next semester to try to avoid debt at all possible. And unfortunately, one of my jobs that I took as an opportunity is 45 minutes away. So I unfortunately am dependent on my car. So really just like what I want to say is that like I don't think that going after a fee for student parking is the way to do it, because as was said before, it would really just motivate those whose parents can pay for it anyways. Instead, I think the incentivizing businesses or incentivizing churches, things like that, would be a great way to go. I also think maybe repurposing already owned property by the government for student parking, or maybe even like construct a parking lot which is where the daddy's money people can go and reside. No offense, by the way. I don't think that's a viable option, is to just hit all of us. So I guess my only question for you guys, which you don't have to answer, just think about, is if you were in our own shoes, if you guys didn't have any extra money to pay, if you didn't have your driveways to park in already, you didn't have your already like predisposed parking spot, would you want the extra stress, and would you want the extra fee on your already maxed out budget for extra parking? Thank you.
Next.
I'm Caden Bull. I live in Joaquin as well. I would just like to hear about how this is going to be enforced. What happens if I say forget to pay on the app? I feel like I've been nickel and dimed by Provo and parking before, and I'm more concerned about that than paying 50 cents a night to park on the road. But that's a concern I have given the current parking situation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, council members. Sorry. So
Speak right into the microphone. And
right into it? Okay.
Name and neighborhood, please.
Sorry.
Thank you.
My name is Bea Albino, and I live in Temp. I think it's like adjacent to Joaquin.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to summarize like the three main concerns I believe that most people have with this. So section 10 of the resolution kind of states that the active management of on-street parking is needed to preserve the benefits of on-street parking and discourage the abuse of this public resource, end quote. I think with a lot of students, the irony behind this statement lies in the notion that if something is delegated as a public resource, severely limiting that amenity for the means of fiscal gain is abuse. Concern number two, the biggest issue of abuse at hand is the measures placed on students if this charter passes. Students are already charged, as you just heard, in several different jurisdictions of Redstone and specifically Aspen Ridge. And so placing those financial repercussions on students kind of relegates our value as participating constituents. Concern number three, section 40, point number 3, subletter D, describes a grace period before the hourly rate is changed. I believe the concern here is that the students have pretty much intermittent schedules, and students aren't going to skip class just to move a car. And students should not have to sacrifice their education in order to avoid punitive measures. And so with all of this in context, I just want the council to consider what aspects of the resolution you're willing to compromise on if the language permits in order to satisfy the needs of your constituents.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello. My name is Aaron Fruing. I also live in Joaquin. I'm strongly opposed against the motion because I believe that this has already been tried and failed. Many of the apartment complexes charge money and fee to park in a certain spot, but they don't guarantee that you'll get parking. And then that just spills over into whatever side street it's on. And I think that by charging money, like I think 50 cents or $10 was thrown out, I see a lot of students probably paying that. You might take maybe one or two cars off, but it's not really going to solve the long-term issue of the parking challenge. You're just going to be charging students to park at places that they're already fighting for. So it's like fighting for a parking spot versus paying to fight for a parking spot. But what I would add as an idea is I've noticed there's a lot of space. There's the road, and then there will be like 3 feet of grass and then the sidewalk. Now, I just wanted to throw out maybe instead of parallel parking, there could be like diagonal parking, and that could be that 3 feet of grass could kind of be pushed back. And that way you could fit more cars in the same space. You wouldn't necessarily have to get more space. You could just fit more cars in that same space you already have.
Yeah, thank you. So there is a link on the screen up here for Open City Hall, which is an open platform for you to give any feedback, specific suggestions. We've given out email, we've given out phone numbers. I hope you'll reach out to us. This is being recorded, so you'll note that some of us aren't taking notes on what you're saying, and that might be alarming. We get to review this and we get notes from this, so we'll definitely be reviewing it and taking it into consideration.
Hi, my name is Jackson Goebel. I live in Joaquin, and honestly, most of my concerns have already been met by people that have come before me. So all I'd really like to say is that a lot of this feels kind of like it's ultimately going to punish people for having a car, when in reality, we should be trying to reward them for not needing one or not using one. So you've already talked about potentially like e-bikes or other solutions that might make it easier for people to not need to rely on that so much. But in the current state of things, I actually have to use a car to go get groceries, or I have to use it to sometimes get to places like West Campus. Especially West Campus. There's no bus stop anywhere remotely close to that. I think the closest one is like half a mile away if you want to get to like the Richards building or to the Tanner building. You basically have to drive, and even then parking isn't great. I just wonder if it's possible for a bus stop or anything like that to be put in there just to, I guess, decrease the demand for students that would actually need to drive over there. It just feels like right now access to campus isn't great unless you have a car, and even then it's pretty terrible. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Isaac Lamoureux. I live in the Temp neighborhood, but I formerly lived in Joaquin. So y'all have asked for our ideas if we have them, so I just kind of came up with an idea while I was in line. Now hear me out. I'm not an econ expert. I'm probably not as qualified as any of y'all, so just hear me out. People that are here are concerned because their complex does not offer parking, so they have to park on the street. There is no other option for them. If they had parking in their complexes, they would. Or because they have a parking pass and there just isn't enough space to park in their complex. So would you consider incentivizing complexes in some way to create more parking or to provide at least affordable parking for students so that it becomes a management problem over a city problem, which frankly, this is a management problem. I feel like this is a supply issue, which generally needs to be addressed with more parking supply.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Cotter. My family has had a home in Joaquin since about the 40s. It's with my great-grandmother's. And so we all have pretty strong feelings about this, and I'm kind of representing everyone there. I want to respond to some comments made at the opening of the meeting that it seems to be that the idea that the reason people are opposed to this is because they don't want to pay for something that they've already had for free. And I want to clarify that it's definitely not free. I looked at the allocation of different taxes and things, and about half of the roads in the state of Utah or half of the funds for the roads in the state of Utah comes from gas and license taxes, which means not just the residents, but pretty much everyone who drives here is paying for those roads. Our property taxes, a portion of the sales taxes that go to the general fund, and the utility transportation fund for residents. Those are all already paying for the roads. So I don't think this is a matter of wanting to get things for free or looking for handouts. I think this is a matter of Provo drivers wanting full access to their public amenities that they already do pay for. And why should we pay for these streets twice?
Thank you. Next.
My name is Grayson Waddell. I live across the street from Liberty Square in Manitou. It's just on the corner.
And something that I have noticed in my time at BYU, I've been here for 2 semesters, got back from my mission last year, is that almost every single one of the people that live in my complex are out of state. This is actually my first time ever having a roommate who's even from Utah in the first place. So my thoughts about paid parking is if a lot of BYU students are coming from out of state, how are students expected to come from their home states without having a car and be able to have access to be able to visit their family without having to worry about buying a plane ticket? Or if there aren't enough spots, then what are students supposed to do if they have a car, if they had a car prior to knowing anything about having to pay for parking and signing a contract, and now having to be faced with the idea of, oh, maybe living in Provo might not be the best option because I'm going to have to pay for parking. And even with like the BYU housing change, from what I understand from that, is that it applies to people who have been attending to BYU for over a year. So freshmen who are still going to be coming from out of state in the first place are still going to have to live in BYU housing. So how's that going to affect freshmen who are most likely not going to have money in the first place to be able to pay?
Thank you.
My name is Isaac. I live at Liberty Square. A lot of great points have been met up, especially with regard to infrastructure and public transit. Similar proposals have been made in 2000 and 2007 to manage the parking situation because it's been bad for decades and decades. And in 2007, from like a quick view of Universe articles and Deseret News articles, you can see that pushing retail in order to be able to live in Joaquin without a car is something that's really hard to do with a permanent residence there. No one wants to have a loud, busy business next to them, right? And there's the general idea that a lot of those bringing retail spaces into residential places will bring property values down. So I think you have to consider how possible it is to bring in the infrastructure needed to be able to walk around in Joaquin before punishing people for having cars.
Thank you.
I'm Carter. I'm Carter Wilson. I live at Liberty Square. I just wanted to reiterate the idea that if we are thinking that this is going to make it so people don't have cars, that's not going to happen. People are still going to drive here, and they're just not going to live here if this gets put in place. And if they do, they're just going to go park down by the permanent residence where there is parking. So I think mostly this is just going to move the problem because people aren't going to pay for it, or if they can't find a spot, even if they already have a permit, they're just going to park 6 blocks down and walk up to their apartment because that's what students will do to save a couple bucks. So I think any idea that we're going to stop, we're just going to sell our cars or not drive here I'm from Alabama, my roommate's from Connecticut, and all the students from St. George and Ogden, they're still going to drive here. We're not going to buy a plane ticket or take the front runner.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sequoia Plug. I live in the Joaquin neighborhood. I'm very much a proponent of like sustainability and making Provo walkable and all of those goals. I have a bike. I try and use that as much as I can. On occasion, I have walked several blocks down to the grocery store with my little recyclable bag to bring back groceries. It's not my preferred way of going grocery shopping. But it does feel a little bit like if that's the stated like problem, like we want Provo to be more walkable and less people to bring their cars, it feels like the chicken's coming before the egg a little bit, in the sense that like in the Joaquin neighborhood, for example, there's the UVX, which is all the way over on University Avenue. There's nothing really inside the Joaquin neighborhood to help people in there get around or get to grocery stores or anything like that as well. So it feels like this isn't really the way to solve that problem per se. I also am concerned with regards to this being like a help the free market kind of, motivate landlords to put in more parking or redevelop or whatever. We'll end up probably with people who do move out of the Joaquin area and then end up driving to campus where there's already not enough parking. And then we're going to have more cars because more people are going to be driving and less people can walk to campus. That's just, I think, a possible unintended side effect that may come of this. And then one idea, you guys say you want more student input, of course, and tonight you got a lot of it here. Perhaps you could also work with some departments or clubs at BYU to hold like a case study competition. I know you guys have done your own studies as well, but that could be a way of getting some cheap labor.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Susan Kruger Barber. I live in Joaquin. I've lived close to campus. Now I live south. And I'm a vice chair of the Joaquin neighborhood. I've witnessed a lot of these attempts, so many times. My main motivation, well, let me just say, this is the biggest crowd I've been in. I've only been up to 8 people since the pandemic. And this is scary for me, but it's that important. I care about safety the most. And the last time I checked, which was a couple of years ago, Joaquin had the most accidents because of visibility, bikes, cars, people. I care about the safety of my neighbors. So that is why I feel we need a plan. I've walked around for a month with students in the neighborhood looking at the visibilities, all of the parking problems. You all, many of you know this and have walked through this with me. A student is the first person who brought it forward, Alec Barton, to you. Fire hydrants are blocked. People's driveways getting out are blocked. The visibility on all the corners, I think all of us have almost been hit, I assume. That is my experience walking through Joaquin. So that's why I feel we need this. And when I see all of the solutions, there have been so many. I've held meetings in my house with half of the people being students with input. We've worked so hard. This is really, truly, for me, about your safety. This is really, truly in your interests. And so I just was wondering if you could address safety as you speak about this with the students so they understand it's not just about money. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. We've got 5 more people online. We need to get through all of them, give them an opportunity. What I'd like to request is that we keep it to 30 seconds or less with each one of the comments so that we can wrap. So first one.
Eric Auerkamp.
Thank you, council members. My name is Eric Auerkamp. I'm a property owner in the Joaquin area. And as I heard the presentation of this parking program, it's not going to create a single new parking spot. What I do see is that it's going to harm the wealthy by taking their money to park the cars. It's going to harm those without any money, the poor, by prohibiting them from parking their cars. And even those that go out and rented a complex that has adequate parking that was suggested, they're still going to have to pay for parking if they want to visit anyone in this entire area. So my question to the council is going to be, what part of the public are you intending on benefiting by such a program other than creating a revenue source for to fund a bureaucracy to run this program?
Thank you. Next person.
That is Aubrey Varga.
Hello. This Varga, go.
Hi, I'm a former BYU student, and I lived in Joaquin for most of the time that I attended BYU. And most of my points have already been addressed, but 2 things I wanted to bring up were that 62% of BYU students are coming from out of state, like has already been stated, and that my car was essential at that time to get to and from home without having, like they said, to fly. And then my other comment is you have stated over and over that you have the students' best interests at heart and that you love your students. And I would like to see some form of implementation of students being part of the city council and having more of a voice, whether that's a student held position in city council or something where you're consistently working with the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person.
Justin Clemens.
Hi, my name is Justin Clemens. I'm a current student at BYU. I'm living at Sparks apartment, but this is near and dear to my heart because I used to live at King Henry, and King Henry is one of those apartments that will charge you for parking, but then not have enough parking. And so I guess my question, I'll just keep it brief, is do you have a backup plan for if this program doesn't work? To me, it seems like this won't work. I would, my concern is that this will indeed hurt the students and that there won't be a backup plan for something that will actually help. And so I guess And so for me, my suggestion would be to force more, to directly pressure the apartments more than, as opposed to indirectly pressuring apartments through forcing students to make different market choices.
Thank you. Next.
Ethan Webb.
Yeah, I have a couple comments. The first one is I am an econ major. And so sort of the talks about supply and demand, I think that the market is currently like using supply and demand. It's just not monetary. So I just wanted to point that out. Like it's basically just time. Like if you can get to campus early enough, then that's like how you would like quote unquote pay. So the free market is actually at work currently. The other thing is I'm curious if y'all have considered like working with BYU to build parking garages like in the Y lot, somehow like doing a subsidy or requiring BYU to build parking garages or increase their parking.
Thank you.
Okay, and the last one is Rose Hopkins.
Okay, Rose. Rose?
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just had a comment. I'm a BYU student currently living in like North Provo, but I've lived all over. And I had been without a car for as long as I could, but circumstances forced me to get a car when I became a senior in my major and I had to start an internship to graduate. And I looked for places to be an internship and I had to eliminate everything that was too far to go by bus or to walk. When I finally found a place, I was thrilled that it was only a 20-minute bus ride away. I then realized that my shifts would be starting at 6 a.m. and that the bus ride would be an hour. So I was forced to get a car. So some students just can't walk. So to say that, or to take a bus, that they have to just learn how to use the bus system is not really useful. So my suggestion would be to fix the buses first before you go and implement like restrictions on parking and driving.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody and your comments. Like I say, we get to review them. Also, keep in mind the link to give more feedback, email the council, call Shannon. So any way that you want to give feedback, I think we'd welcome it. But we appreciate the participation. We appreciate the input. And I think I mentioned before that I'd give everybody a chance to just say one more thing in closing. As far as the council is concerned, I'll just say that for me personally, I'm the guy that worries about, Taco Bell charging for water. So I would rival almost anybody with how cheap I am and with how sensitive I am to costs and fees for things that we get. And so we'll be very careful about this. The commitment that I would have personally is that we're not going to charge for anything unless it's going to make something better. And if it doesn't make something better, then it's not going to happen. That's the bottom line. So we'll just go down and everybody, if you've got a brief comment, we've got to get out of here in the next 5 minutes.
Thank you. It takes me 2 hours to respond to an email. I'm just notoriously slow at it. And so to have been able to have this dialogue in just 2 hours has been amazing. I would love, if there's interest, I would love to get together again and hash out and talk through these things. And so look for that. If there's interest, I would love to get together again.
I won't be voting on this either because my term is ending. You asked for 1 point. So my 1 point would be in answer to the question of who will benefit from this. And here's one group that I hope would benefit from it. Last time there were 2 young women that came and spoke about how sometimes they have to park several blocks away when they come home from work at night and they have felt unsafe walking back to their apartment. My daughter's been in that situation. I hope that if this is successful, that all of the young women living in the Joaquin area would feel safer and be able to get to their apartment quickly at night.
Thanks for your service, Dave.
I just wanted to comment on something I hope you appreciate that we're not legally obligated to have this meeting. We did it because we wanted to hear from you. Town halls are rare. This is an important issue. and we appreciate your comments, your ideas. We're a long ways from finalizing this, so thank you for your participation.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone who's come out tonight and spent this time with us. These are long meetings. Most government meetings are, so thank you. And we do care about your input, and we hope that you will get input from other people as you form your ideas and as you form your opinions. I was a student in a completely different city, and I did not have a car, and there was not a grocery store within like 1.2 miles. There wasn't a creamery. There was barely a gas station. And so I had a completely different experience than people who were undergraduates at BYU. And those experiences are unique even at BYU. So I hope that we'll all gather as much information as possible so we can have a constructive dialogue. I'll just give you my phone number one more time if you didn't get it. It's 801-900-3217. There are many issues. You can contact us about climate change, gender parity, taxes.
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. So glad that was brought up. I would love for you to contact me about Taylor Swift.
I just want to say that I remembered where the meeting was. I looked it up on my email. So B092JFSB on December 2nd at 7:30 p.m. We'll be hosting a meeting to address what one woman said online. I've been talking with some political science professors, some students to figure out how to get more regular input from students in the city. So that's something we would love to try to figure out with you. Obviously, students rotate through BYU every 4 years. And so that's part of our challenge, but it's also our opportunity because you all have brilliant ideas, and I heard many tonight. So I hope you'll come. I am not in the weeds on the parking issue as much as the people who are on the committee are. So we have a lot of other things we'd love to talk with you about at that occasion, but I'm always open to getting more feedback on this particular issue as well. So thanks so much for coming tonight.
Thank you. Again, thank you for coming. We do have to clear out of this room, so there might be some counselors that could discuss with you and answer a quick question, but we do need to do it outside of this room. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your participation.